Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode in our podcast series. Today, we're very happy to be joined by Arela Solis. She's a recent graduate of Harvard Business School. And in today's episode, we'd like to talk with her about her educational journey and how it led to where she is right now. Welcome, Arela.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me here.
It's our pleasure. Arela, if we may, let's start with your childhood. Where are you from originally? And what were your original academic goals?
Sure. I'm originally from Mexico City. I was raised in Mexico. I went to both middle school and high school in the French Lycée. And and yeah, I would say I had a pretty normal but pretty academic heavy childhood just because the French Lycée is a little bit demanding in terms of grades and times you spend at school. But really normal high school. I wouldn't say I had planned my whole academic life at that time of like, oh, I'm gonna go to college here and then I'm gonna do a master's degree. I think that came in a little bit later in life. But I would say my parents, both of them have PhDs. So I always thought I was going to do a higher education degree, and both my brothers as well, when did their master's degrees, they did MBAs. So I grew up in a family that kind of like really valued the educational portion, and little by little, it was like more clear that I was probably going to go and do a master's degree.
Uh-huh. Was it specifically an MBA that your master's was going to be in?
So I didn't know, again, like this is like early childhood. I didn't know.
I okay. I was
Oh,
referring to a little bit later, but
yeah, yeah.
please.
No. Later, yes. I would say again, my dad did a PhD, but also ended up, instead of graduating from the PhD, he ended up doing an MBA. And both of my brothers also did their MBAs. So when I started evaluating what type of master's degree, I kind of like thought maybe of doing a dual degree, something like environmental related or social related. But I would say they heavily influenced me into like, you should take the broader path, and an MBA is so broad that you can choose to do anything after that.
Uh-huh. What did you start preparing for that as much as one is possible to prepare for it when you were in high school?
No, I definitely did not prepare in high school for an MBA. I started preparing for my MBA while I was working, I would say.
Oh, so after college.
Yes, after college.
Uh-huh. How did you make your decision about what to study and where to go to undergraduate?
Yeah, so I evaluated going abroad and I evaluated going to Canada. A lot of my classmates were going to Canada. A lot of my classmates were going to France just because our education was French. But I would say in there as well, like my family played a big role. Like my dad really pushed me into, I think you should stay in Mexico and do college in Mexico and then do a master's degree somewhere abroad. And we hadn't talked about the US at that point, but he was like, I really think you should just stay in Mexico. So I evaluated a couple of like universities in Mexico and I ended up selecting EITAM. EITAM is a heavy analytical university and is known as one of the best ones for economics, math, and both of my brothers went to EITAM. My father went to EITAM. So I kind of would say that I was a little bit brainwashed into going into EITAM. If I would do it all over again, I would probably select another university. I had a great time and great education, but I would say I was so influenced by my family that thinking a little bit back, I would have probably been happier at something like Tec de Monterrey or another university. But yeah, that's how I got there.
Uh-huh. When you were there, what were your academic interests primarily?
Yeah, so I honestly, that's the difference between Mexico and the US education, where the US education, what I've discovered throughout the years is a little bit more, as I was saying, like very broad, right? Like you're not expected to select what your major is when you're like 17 or 18 years old.
Right, right.
And and on the other hand, the Mexico education is extremely specific. So I actually started studying economics and I couldn't select any courses. Like I had a specific curriculum that I had to follow. So I did economics for the first couple of years, and then I was like, I am actually more interested in business. So I did a shift after 3.5 years um, to business, and I would say beyond like academics, there's something called like social service, and that you have to do social service in Mexico in order to graduate from college. And I was
Hmm.
deeply interested in a program, and that the name of the program was Enlace and was run by college students, and we were trying to go to like rural communities in Mexico and support the economic development or give them courses or help kids like study. So that was a little bit of what I did.
Hmm. What was your first job after graduation?
Yeah, so my first job was actually like actual like serious job beyond like the
Yes.
summer schools and summer like jobs and everything. It was still while I was studying, but I think it made a really big impact. So that's why I think it was important. It's important to highlight that one. But it was at an accelerator and investment fund for social and environmental companies. So we were working
Oh,
with,
interesting.
yeah, and the name was New Ventures, and it's still running. But we were basically, it had to be, the companies we worked with had to be for-profit companies. They couldn't be nonprofits, but they had to be solving either a social problem, so selling a product to the base of the pyramid or supporting the base of the pyramid in some way, or an environment or solving an environmental issue. So I got to work with entrepreneurs from all over Latin America and supporting them in different ways. We ran these acceleration programs that were funded by, like, one of them was funded by the Swiss corporation. Another one was funded by a couple of banks in Mexico City. So we got funds from different entities and just supported these entrepreneurs.
Was that more venture capital or private equity?
It was more venture capital.
What would you say you learned the most in those in that job?
I learned a ton of things. One, as I was kind of like mentioning, I wasn't super happy with college, and I always had good grades because I was a very dedicated student, but I didn't feel very passionate in my classes or very interested in what I was studying. It just felt as like very systematic of, you have to learn this. This is how you get good grades, and that's it.
Hmm.
But I didn't
Hmm.
feel that like intellectual curiosity and didn't feel like I got in. And when I started working, I was fascinated. I was really fascinated by like these entrepreneurs, what they were building, and I just had so much fun just getting to know them. Obviously, like it was also kind like stressful, and there were a lot of responsibilities. And I would say like I was pretty young, and they were already giving me a lot of responsibilities. But I learned about entrepreneurship and
Hmm.
what it meant to be an entrepreneur, and just met all of these people that were really passionate about what they were doing and solving these amazing challenges all across Latin America. I learned what it was like to like work with a team, and I was very lucky that I had incredible managers, and there were female managers, which they were like role models for me, and had incredible careers. My manager had an MBA actually from Colombia and had been a consultant, so she was very meticulous about her like slides and how they had to be perfect. So I was not a consultant, but being managed by a consultant like helped me learn a little bit of what it's like to be in that environment and like have like very high expectations from you.
That's fascinating. Now, it is this point. which probably would be the most interesting to well, everything's been interesting, but single most interesting thing to our clientele, our audience would be, how did you make the decision to go to business school, and when did that take place?
Yeah. So I would say it even not, when I was at that point, I was so happy working that I was at that point saying like, I don't know if I want to go back to studying. Like I'm having so much fun working, then why would I go back to school? And as I was saying, like my experience like in school wasn't great. So yeah, like why would I go back to that environment? But then after working at New Ventures, I actually decided to become an entrepreneur. And I was working with a woman from Israel that wanted to expand her business model to Latin America. And I was working with another entrepreneur in Mexico that she was my partner and was going to help me fundraise. She was a seasoned entrepreneur. And it was chaos. It was an emotional roller coaster in many ways, as people that have been entrepreneurs might know. I was very young, like basically that was my first job out of college, becoming an entrepreneur. And I was trying to raise money. I was trying to speak to all of these amazing women to invite them into the program. And I ended up after 6 to 8 months, while I was like having no salary and feeling a little bit stuck, saying like, look, this is not working. My partner in Israel was like also going through a pivot in their like in her own company in Israel, and my partner in Mexico was also like doing a ton of things. So I was like, okay, I need to take a step back and I need to work in something that's like a business, a proper business, learn about business skills, and then I might become an entrepreneur again. So I joined Uber at that time, and I joined the team that was going to launch Uber Eats in Mexico, which was incredible because it was being in a startup, fully like startup inside a massive startup. We were a very, very small team. I was the first external hire. Everyone else came from the rides team and was just moving into the Uber Eats team. And so I had to learn a lot. And I can tell you a lot more about the 3 years that I did at Uber, but it was at Uber where I started actually more seriously thinking about doing an MBA. And actually, in my last year at Uber, that's where I spent time preparing and doing my applications.
Arella, at this point, when you made your decision, did you discern specific skills that you wanted to obtain in going to business school?
Yes, for sure. So I actually did an exercise while I was at Uber with one of the senior leaders, and it was very, very interesting because we actually mapped out the next 10 years of our lives, not in a super specific way, but in a high level. Where do you want to be in 10 years? And then once you've determined like where do you want to be in 10 years, we would look back and say, okay, what needs to happen in the next 10 years to get to that point? And for me, it was I wanted to become an entrepreneur in 10 years. So what needed to happen? And I mapped out, okay, while I was at New Ventures, I learned a little bit more about operations and entrepreneurship. Then while I was an entrepreneur, I learned a little bit about like failing and what it's like. At Uber, I would say I learned heavy operational skills. I also did like marketing and partnerships, and my last role was like strategy and planning. But I feel I was lacking some, one, I would say, financial skills. I had never gone deeply into finance, and I feel like I had a gap there. And I also felt that I wanted to learn about leadership and how to manage people. So those were the two main things that I thought it would be interesting, and obviously hone on other skills that I already had, but just go on a deeper, higher level.
Very interesting. Arella, so at this point, yeah, the thought of going to business school is in your mind. How did you make your decision about which schools to apply to? No, we realize that you ultimately chose Harvard, but I presume there were a whole bunch that you were considering.
Yeah, I actually applied to 5 business schools, and I would say it's a lot. If I were to do it again, I would probably split them up a little bit. But basically, I started doing a lot of research, and so one of them was Booth and University of Chicago Booth. it's the university that my dad went to, my two brothers went to. So it was basically, for them, it was like, oh, she's gonna go to Booth. And I had been to my brother's graduations, and I had actually spent a lot of time in Chicago. So I knew that I was going to apply to Booth just because it was more in the family. Then my manager at that time had done a program that I found fascinating. It's a lauder program at Wharton. So you actually get a dual degree.
Oh, yes, the Lauder program, a very famous one.
Yeah. So she had done the program, and her husband had made the program, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was an incredible program. I felt that it matched my profile very well, where I was like interested in social issues and in like a very international background, and and I just thought it, and she spoke wonders of it. Then I really wanted to go to Stanford. Stanford was like the mecca for entrepreneurship. And while
Hmm.
I was at New Ventures, I remember that one of our acceleration programs, we took 10 entrepreneurs into San Francisco. And one of the things that we actually did was go into Stanford, and we met a couple of professors at Stanford that were teaching a class. I don't fully remember the name right now, but it was just a class that they mixed up students from medical school, they mixed up students from the business school, engineering, from all paths of lives, and they had to create a product. And I remember saying, like, one day I might be coming here. It's just so amazing. And just the Stanford campus is gorgeous. And while I was like visiting, also like I heard about Berkeley, and Berkeley is very well known for also having like some social entrepreneurship programs, and having like a very, like, it's very big on environmental programs as well. And then Harvard, funnily enough, was not like it. I didn't know a lot of people from Harvard, and I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I should apply to Harvard or not. And obviously, it has this big name, but I had no real connection to it,
Hmm.
except another one of my managers at Uber. His name was Pepe, and he had been to Harvard, and he heavily pushed me like, you're applying to all of these other schools. Yeah, you really need to apply to Harvard. Why wouldn't you consider it? So I was like, okay, I'll apply to Harvard, but it really wasn't on top of my list. Like, I would say my top ones were probably like the Wharton program and Stanford program.
Mm. If I may pause in asking application questions, I'm not familiar with that program you mentioned at Stanford. What specifically was it? Was it a certificate program?
No, no, no. It was also the MBA, like GSB.
Oh no, the program you spoke of where you got together with engineering students and other kind of students. What was that?
It's actually a class. So it's just a class that you can take, and it's open to anyone from any degree.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's a very, very famous class because a lot of really amazing products. I think they have like a baby incubator that has saved tons of lives that came out of that program. And they have so like amazing products just because they were able to get people from very different backgrounds that just solve, like, were like, okay, what do we want to solve, and think creatively on how to solve it. um but it's just a class. It's not a certificate or anything. It's just a very famous class that you can take in, I think, all the way from college into graduate, and there might even be some PhD students that take it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, now into the application process. You've now made your decision and you've got a good list of schools that interest you. At that time, was taking the GMAT required?
Yes. So the GMAT was required, and I would say the GMAT was the hardest piece in my application, and
Hmm.
it took me a long time. So I made my decision like, okay, I want to do business school. I'm sure of it. I have this list of schools. So that was in January 28, 2018. So January 2018, I started studying for the GMAT. And I was like, okay, I'm going to study for like 3 months. They can take the GMAT around March. March or April, and then I'll start doing, and I'm going to apply in round one. And it took me almost 12 months to do the GMAT. So I ended up not applying on in
Mm,
first round. I ended up applying in second round. And yeah, the GMAT was really hard. And
mm.
the reason is because the Mexican and French systems are really, really different from the US systems, and they don't prepare you for that exam. So I would get every single day at 7 a.m. to the office. I was also in a very intense period at Uber. So we were working like 12 to 14 hours a day, but I would every single
Mm.
day religiously get at 7 a.m. to the office, study from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., and then also spend the weekends studying. And even with that intense amount of studying, I had to do the GMAT 5 times.
Oh, did you? Did you take a prep course of any sort?
I did. I did. I took, so I remember like buying a lot of people also helped me and gave me like their books because, and I remember having, it was a long time ago. So let me think. And I also did a ton of, I think I did a Veritas course. So I did one course online. I I never did the economist course, but I wish I had done it because that's what I meant to anyone applying, and I think it's really good. Um, I actually went to a course in Mexico, like in person with a professor that has been teaching for the last like 10, 15 years. And just on my own as well, I practiced a lot of questions. And then I would say like the most helpful thing were actually the when you buy the GMAT, not the GMAT course, but the GMAT test, you have a couple of practice tests, and you can buy
Right.
more of those tests. So I actually did a ton of those. But then at some point,
Uh-huh.
like actually like remember the questions, so that it doesn't. It's not helpful that much because when you repeat those tests so many times, um, it just you just start like remembering the answers.
Right, right. So during this time that you were studying for the GMAT, were you doing the other parts of the application as well?
No, I was not. I was fully focusing on the GMAT, and that's a recommendation that I got from other people, that I should just focus on the GMAT first and then on the other parts. And I'm actually happy I did it that way because the essay portion, and I'm happy to talk about it after this, but it's very time consuming as well, and it just puts you in a very different mindset. So no, I was just doing the GMAT and fully focusing on that.
Hmm. Uh, I do believe that most people should do things that way as well. Now let's turn to the application essay. First and foremost, did you do your top choices first?
um so I don't remember what order that I did, like what the process that I actually did was while I was starting to think about my essays, and all of them are like different flavors of the same question, I would say. So what I actually did is I like I left the GMAT aside. I was like, okay, good enough score. I can just move on, and and started reflecting on like what were the most important times in my life. And I think I did an exercise where I thought about 10 important moments all throughout my life and just went very deep on those moments and wrote like long paragraphs about those moments in my life. And then once I had selected like those moments, I was able to piece those moments through different applications.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you wrote a lot first, and
Yeah,
then inserted them as appropriate.
exactly. And then
Okay.
I think you're right. I definitely focused first on Wharton and Stanford, and I think Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford were the ones that I focused first, and also because the Harvard essay question is very broad and has no word limit, versus the Stanford question has a very specific word limit. So working on the Harvard question first was actually easier because I trimmed it down and got it into on one point. But then for Stanford, you have to like trim that question substantially, right? So like,
Hmm.
yeah, I
Hmm.
went for like from broad to specific.
Uh-huh. Were you advised? It's an unusual method you chose to pursue, a fascinating one. But were you advised to do things that way?
Um, yeah, I think it was friends that had applied before me, and also like I think I got that recommendation from someone. I don't exactly remember who. Um, but I don't think I came I came to that conclusion on my own.
Mhm. How long did it take you, this entire essay writing process?
So because the GMAT in my case had taken me so long, I did have to then um spend like I spent I think like 2 months. And I would say like spending less than 4 weeks is going to be very hard. Like obviously it depends how long you're doing and if you're like if you have a job or not while you're applying. But yeah, I think I took like between 6 to 8 weeks to finish the essays.
Well, that's not actually particularly long. Were you still on the 2 hour a day working on it as you were on the studying for the GMAT?
Yes, I
Oh,
definitely.
were you?
Yeah.
May I ask this, Arella? Was your work suffering as a result of such intensity inside and outside the job?
I would say like no, I don't think it suffered, and I think other things suffered. And Michael, and I don't know if I regret this or not, but I stopped exercising completely at that time, and I stopped seeing some of my close friends at that time. So
Mm,
I like
mhm,
I sacrificed balance, and just like I spent a lot of time with my boyfriend because he was, and I would say that's helpful. He was also going through the process and was suffering with me. So we would
mm,
spend together on the weekends, and that that was a lot of the time we spent together. Um, but at least I didn't have to sacrifice that piece. I then spent some time with my family, not much, but yeah, some time with my family, and then all of my other time I was working or studying. And some of my really close friends like definitely got angry at some point. It was like, what are you
mm.
doing? Like you're not prioritizing us. But I just took that very conscious decision that it was important for me. And I think it's also an exercise of persistence, I would say. If you really want to do the master's degree, it I feel like it does require that amount of persistence. So for some people it's obviously easier, and as I went to HBS, I then found some people that just like, oh, I spent 3 weeks studying, and then I did my essays in 4 weeks and I got to Harvard first round. And then you also find people more like me that had like a harder time applying. And 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 it's okay, right? Like it's very different paths of life, and it doesn't make you either less smart or less capable. It's just like different.
Yes, of course. Okay, well, now let's turn to the decision to attend Harvard. Now, you've applied, you've spent, it sounds like a year and a half in the preparation to apply, and now you have your decisions. How did you make your decision to attend Harvard?
Yeah, it was also a really hard time, and looking back on it, it generated a lot of stress. So I was really lucky that and then also I think I worked really hard for it, but I also think there's obviously a luck component because it's such a competitive process that I got accepted at Booth, I got accepted at Harvard, and then I got waitlisted at Stanford. And for me, I really wanted to go to Stanford. So I in my head I was like, I'm gonna go to Stanford. I'll do anything I can to like get that wait list into acceptance. And then, but on the other hand, like you never know. So I did go into the admit weekends for I didn't go to the admit weekend for Harvard, but I talked to a lot of people, and I went to the admit weekend for Booth.
Oh, you did not go to the one for Harvard.
No, I did not, because I think it just crossed over in some commitment that I already had.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I really couldn't go. But what I did do is talk to an incredible amount of people. So I spoke to all of my mentors about it. I talked to my family, like my two brothers, I would say are really good mentors of mine and have always been. And any hard decision, I always talk to them. So my partner, it was really hard because he was accepted at Booth. He was waitlisted at Stanford, but was not accepted at Harvard. Um, so that's why I say it was a very, very difficult decision for me. And also, like, I think there was a really big thing about also financially. At Booth, I hadn't received any scholarship, but at Harvard, because it's financial aid is need based, I had gotten like a 60% scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up negotiating with Booth, and I was able to get some financial aid as well. Once I told them, like, hey, I've got accepted into all of like these other schools. But as I talked to more and more people, and some of those people had actually done long distance relationships, like their partners were also at Booth and they were at Harvard, I started thinking, like, actually Harvard is a better choice for me. And part of it was breaking from the family tradition. I didn't want to do what my family had done, but I also, going into the admit weekends, I do think that is really helpful as you're making the decision. And I thought Booth was incredible, and it's an incredible school, but I thought it was another flavor of my college. And it's funny because a lot of people that went to my college in Mexico actually then go to Booth. So it was full of other people that I knew and people that had studied the same thing that I did. And I remember that the other reason that I didn't go into the admit weekend is because the interview for HBS, I had been on campus. So I had already been to the Harvard campus. I had already done a few events. I had been into I had done the case method, which I always recommend. Like, if anyone wants to apply to HBS, I think visiting the school and doing one class in the case method is super important, because it's such a different way of teaching that it's so, so important for like doing it before you apply and understanding if it's something you like. And when I did my interview at Harvard, I loved it. I absolutely love the campus. It's such a dream being in there. It's actually full of bunnies running around. It just feels like a fairy tale. Um, and the case method, I remember being in the classroom so engaged. So exactly the opposite, as I was saying in my college classes, I couldn't stop listening and like just hearing all of these amazing comments that people were saying. So I didn't feel like I needed to go into the admit weekend, because I had already had the flavor of Harvard in my interview.
Oh, I want to discuss the Harvard case study method at length, but before we do, how was your interview? You mentioned that you liked the visit to Harvard. Did you find the interview at Harvard difficult?
Yeah, I thought it was also very, like, every school has obviously a different process, and I can talk about each of them, but Harvard specifically, so they invite you to campus, and instead of most of the other schools, the person that interviews you is an alum or a current student. So they use second year students or alums, like Stanford uses alums, Booth uses alums to interview you. But Harvard uses extremely trained people in admissions, and they study your application at length. So there's someone that just read through your whole essays, all of the really, like, the other questions, your resume, everything, versus like in other schools, they just have your resume and that's it, and they ask you more about your life and obviously like specific questions. But at Harvard, they just studied your application in a very deep way, and I found that amazing and very impressive, because it just seemed like they took a lot of time and care into reading everything that you had given them. And the interviewer, it's just 30 minutes versus other interviews were much longer, like 45 minutes to an hour. This was 30 minutes, like time clocked, and it went really fast. And the interviewer was really nice, but they're also like trained into not showing any emotion. So you don't know if you're doing well or not. Um, but she went into like a lot of like questions about my essays, questions about my work experience. And then what is very interesting is that they're probing of like how successful is this person going to be in the case method. And the case method, what requires is like good communication skills, being able to be succinct, but also being able to explain a hard problem to, like, if you were explaining it to someone that has no background in it, or like to a 5-year-old. So I got asked questions like, so why would an Uber driver be an Uber driver versus an Uber Eats partner? Or tell me more about the economics of a restaurant joining Uber Eats. So hard questions, but not necessarily hard for someone that has spent a lot of time working on those, right? Like that was my job at Uber. I could very easily explain, but what they were trying to assess, or what I think they were trying to assess is like, okay, can you explain these like hard concepts to someone that has no background on it, in a couple of minutes, which is what you do every day in the case method.
Mhm. That's interesting. Arela, as an aside, we've actually had people discuss their Harvard interviews, and they actually had different experiences, but that's not for here. But let's go into Harvard for now. The case study, the famed Harvard case study method. You mentioned that coming from a different academic environment, learning the American system would be difficult, well, at least different. And on top of that, you have Harvard's rather unique style, which of course has been imitated by other schools. How was your adjustment upon arrival, just academically first?
Yeah. So everything at Harvard, and it's funny that you mentioned that a lot of other schools like imitate the Harvard case method. But what is different at HBS is that the whole classroom is designed for the case method. So you're put into sections of 90 people in your first year, and even how they design the sections, they try to make them as diverse as possible. So you get people like from very different nationalities, from very different industries, from being professional athletes to being consultants to being from finance to being from tech, like I was. Um, so you get a really big set of different opinions and profiles, and then you sit in the same seat, for the first year, or like for the first 6 months, and then you move, but in the same classroom. And instead of like you changing classrooms, the professors are the ones that come to you. So everything
Mhm.
is designed for the case method, and you get to know those 90 people pretty intimately, in terms of like you almost know what they're going to say, right? It's like, oh, that person has this type of experience. And then the professors also study your profile. So like I remember like some of my first classes, I was like fascinated, but it was like, oh, Eddie, you used to work on finance, and you did you had this profile on this NBA company. Tell us more about it. And obviously, like Eddie had no idea that he was going to be asked. Sometimes they tell you in advance, but they just had so many things to contribute. So I don't think it was super hard for me to adjust, because they make it easy for you to kind of like understand the case method. They make it easy. One thing I do think that it was really hard is you're having to speak in front of 90 people, and it's an exercise of communication, as I was talking about in the interview process, every single day. And these are like some of the most like smartest, most accomplished people I have ever been surrounded with. And you feel that obviously people are listening and quote unquote judging you for what you're saying. So that part was hard. The adjusting piece, like everybody was going through an adjustment, everyone was going through the same thing. And I think Harvard is really good at helping you if you're struggling, or helping you like prepare. You do like study groups every single morning where you're supposed to discuss the case, and that way you come prepared to class. So I felt like I had a lot of support, like adjusting. And I think it's more of an exercise of like building your confidence and just getting used to that. It's an insane amount of reading. So like if you don't like reading, I think Harvard is going to be a tough choice, because you have to read like between like 50, 70 pages almost every day. So yeah, I would say that's how I felt. And there were different moments where I thought it was like more challenging or less challenging. But I always found it like a very supportive network, and just helping you get there.
Uh-huh. I'm dating myself, but when I went to my business school years, Harvard and indeed a great many other business schools had a reputation for being cutthroat and very grade competitive. Did you find that to be the case?
So that's what I had heard as well. And I think that's one of the things that changed a lot throughout the years, or has just had like Harvard has a bad reputation. But the reality is like the classroom gets super emotional.
Really? Emotional?
Yeah, like you can't imagine the amount of times like people like cried in classrooms, that I even like cried in some of the sessions, because people share like deep and vulnerable experiences that they had. And I didn't feel at all that it was cutthroat. It was such a supportive group of students, and I might have had just a different experience, but this is the conversation that I've had to like with a lot of my friends from HBS, that I think Harvard does not do a good job at advertising how much you actually like go deep and personal in the classroom. And I'm still super close with a lot of people in my section. And and I would say like I never felt that it was competitive. I never felt that it was aggressive. And I also I kind of like assessed that in when I was interviewing, and I did that classroom case session. I also did not feel that. And one of the things that actually shocked me a little bit in a positive way, but while I was interviewing, it was me and other like 3 or 4 students that we were sitting on the classroom. And all of the students, when they introduced you, like I think the professor introduced us like, hey, these 4 students are interviewing. All of them stood up and started clapping at us, just like celebrating. And I was so shocked because I was not expecting it. And I was like, wow, this feels amazing. They're just celebrating us. We haven't even gotten accepted. They're just celebrating that we
Oh,
got.
you hadn't. You hadn't.
No, I hadn't gotten accepted yet. And Harvard does this thing as well. Like the ones that I got accepted, and I was in the classroom, we used to do that for like when you had visitors or your parents came into class, we would like if the person made a comment, we would clap and just like celebrate them. And it just felt so nice for the parents or for the friends that were there like visiting the person.
Uh, to make you look good before your parents, presumably.
Exactly.
Arella, extraordinary. I had not heard the level of detail that you've just shared with us about the classroom environment. Yes, indeed, things have changed tremendously. That is without question. Particularly fascinating. Arella, what about business studies was it that could bring people to tears?
Yeah. So in particular, I feel like in leadership classes, there were some hard topics, right? Like some we talked about discrimination, right? Like you would have
Oh, I see. I see.
of someone that had gotten discriminated, or like some of the cases talked about a case of like harassment at work, and like in very important topics. Like if you're planning to become a leader, you need to be aware of like what is the type of culture that you're going to build in your company, and or like in the company you're going to be working at. And some of the people shared like really hard experiences they have had in their own firms, and how they wanted to change that. um or how you thought about like prioritizing family and work. And I think in general, you're surrounded by very type A ambitious people, which the default might be like being like sacrificing some like family, friends for work. And I think actually Harvard makes a really good um like really good exercise to make you think about like how are you going to prioritize your life? What is valuable for you? Um and again, like people share very difficult situations. The other thing is there's this exercise as well that's called my takes. And I think Stanford has a very similar, like touchy feely, I think it's a class that they do. But at Harvard, what it is it's called my takes. It's totally voluntary. So you can talk about one of the experiences in your life that has maybe been challenging or just share your story. And it's an amazing opportunity to be vulnerable. And wow, like I obviously cannot share some of the stories that I heard because there's this implicit um, secrecy of like I'm not going to
Yes,
share
of course.
what I heard. But it's like people going through diseases, people going through addiction, people going through like some very hard things, and how they surpass that. And obviously that brought me to tears so many times. And even I shared a very very difficult like family story that I had, and it was an amazing exercise for me, right? Like I had never shared this with anyone, and I was just standing and being vulnerable in front of like 90 people sharing my deepest secret.
Oh, that is interesting. Arella, you went to Harvard with a clear goal of what you wanted to learn. Towards that goal, what learnings and in particular, what courses got you closest to it?
um Yeah, I would say a lot of them in very surprising ways. So I one of the goals that I mentioned was leadership, and all of the classes got me into leadership in some way or another because that's how it's structured, right? It's always like someone that has to make a decision in the case, and there's different ways of making that decision, so it makes you analyze and how would you act if you were in their shoes. So leadership I learned it through many things. Then I would say like communication, obviously as well through like many classes, but I also took like one of my classes was um, communication course that I actually took at the Kennedy School, and we had to do speeches every single class or every two classes. You would think about a speech and just share it in a couple of minutes with your classmates. In terms of finance, that was another one of my goals. And I knew that I didn't want to go like super deep, like, oh, I'm going to go into like private equity. But um, the basic financial courses that you take on the first year were super, super useful for me. Um,
Mm,
and the other really good part is because you're not picking your classes on the first year, you um you're surrounded by people from again like that have done private equity, venture capital, all of these amazing experiences, and they're your classmates and and help you explain those like hard concepts for you. So yeah, my finance classes were pretty good first year, first semester and then second semester. And then on my second year, I took a mix of very different classes, but a lot of them focused on entrepreneurship. So I took like scaling tech ventures, which was incredibly useful. I took a class called Reimagining Capitalism that was fascinating and thinking about social problems and metrics and ESG. Um, so yeah, I think through many different classes, and every single class is just that I took was really good, and I learned a lot about my classmates as well.
interesting. Arella, as a result of all your learning, all your experiences at Harvard, do you feel your goals, life, professional, changed in any way from the time you entered?
Um, I would say it's funny because this is something that I've talked to a lot of my friends and classmates. I feel like I came in with being I'm going to build a company that's going to impact a billion people and changing the world. And and I still like would love to do something like that, and hopefully I'm able to achieve it one day. But I also become much more of a realist in a lot of ways, and understanding, okay, if you want to do that, what are the sacrifices that you're going to make, and are you willing to make those sacrifices? And it was 2 years for me that it really allowed me to take a step back, reevaluate, like, what are my values, what are the things I care about, like, how do I want to be spending my time. And I don't feel that I would have gotten that chance if I would have just kept working nonstop. And I was in a very intense job at Uber, growing like crazy, expanding the Uber Eats business. And I learned a lot from there. But I really think I needed those like 2 years in my life for reflection and just like realign my path. So I don't think it necessarily like changed. Just made me much more conscious and thoughtful about how I'm going to achieve it, and if I want to achieve it in the end.
Oh, that's sounds like a great, outcome of your education, beyond the education.
Yeah, no, and I think the other really amazing outcome, and I'm really grateful, is my group of friends. Like, really, a lot of people going to business school because of like networking. But I think beyond networking, you create some connections, like deep, deep connections. And some of my closest friends right now are the people that I spent 2 years. Well, in my case, actually, it was also COVID. So I got to extend my business degree by 6 additional months, which I highly
Mm.
recommend. It was very fun. but but no, like the people that I met and the people that I became close to are going to be important for the rest of my life. And it's female friends that are going through very similar situations that I am, and that have become like really amazing mentors. It's become like really close. Whenever I actually have an issue at work and I need advice, I just put it in my section chat. Like, we still have a section chat. Hey, has anybody worked on this industry or has like had this problem before? And every time you get like at least 4 or 5 people that reach out to you saying like, hey, I went through this a couple of years ago, or I'm just going through this right now. I'm happy to guide you through how I think about it.
Well, that is enviable. Very, useful, resource, presumably for the rest of your life.
Yes, for sure.
And now a final topic, Arella. How did you decide where you wanted to start your new career after business school?
Yeah, that was definitely a hard choice. And so in my last semester, I actually spent a lot of time interviewing. And I was doing about like, on average, like 3 interviews per week, which was exhausting. And I knew I wanted to do a company that was between like Series A to Series C. Um, I wanted to do like strategy and operations, and I knew that I wanted to do something in 3 different industries, like one of the 3 industries, obviously, like not the three in combination. But I wanted to either do education, I wanted to do healthcare, or I wanted to do food. Um, and so, like, join a startup within some of those 3 industries. And I was very lucky that I ended up having 3 offers. When I graduated, I had an offer for becoming a chief of staff at a Series A company that was actually not in, in the industries that I just mentioned. It was fintech, but it was a fast growth startup. It was ex Uber, like the founders were ex Uber, and was fascinating. And they were growing really fast in Mexico. But I would have been based in New York. The second company was a food tech company based in San Francisco, and I was going to be working for the strategy team. And the third company was a food tech company based in New York, and it was a fascinating company because it was trying to change how the restaurant industry works. And a friend of mine from HBS had connected me to this company because she also worked at that company. And I was going to be working for the chief strategy officer, like working on M&A and special projects with him. The name of the company is Wonder. And yeah, like my boss was ex HBS. They had the founder was fascinating, and we had actually had a case about him while I was at HBS. So I thought that was it was really hard to make the choice, but I ended up choosing Wonder, this last company that I mentioned.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations. Arella, looking back, were do you feel that there are things you could have done in the application process or in the studying process once you got to Harvard that would have made your experience even better?
Um, in my application process, I probably spent too much time on the GMAT. I would consider, like, if I had to do no one ever told me that the GRE was also an option. So the first thing that I would do is evaluate if the GMAT or GRE is what option is best for me. I don't know. Maybe the GRE would have been an easier option for me. And it's not about it's an easier exam, it's just a different exam. But I would have considered that before jumping into
Mm,
that. And for the schools, like, they really don't care. Like, there was this like
mhm.
gossip, or like this thing of like, oh, if you do the GRE, they're not going to accept you, and it's not true. So just assessing that would have been the first thing. And then I would have probably been more selective on the type of courses that I took for the GMAT once I selected that, instead of like trying to do everything, like read the books and also do some courses online and do a like in-person course. It just was draining. Um, and what else? I think I this is something that I did, but I would really recommend doing, is really talking to people that went to these schools and understanding if you align with them, and align. All of these schools are amazing, but each of them are a little bit different, right? Like, in this case, like, Booth is extremely analytical and has incredible professors, but the type of studying is really different than what you do at HBS, and is very different to what you do at GSB. So just maybe visiting the schools and talking to a lot of people is helpful for understanding like what is the best school for you. Um, so yeah, doing those two things, I would say it's important.
Wonderful. And now that was looking back. Looking forward, what would you consider to be your definition of success?
Um, it's a really good question, and I think I'm still figuring it out. And I
Oh,
hope
reasonable. Yes.
I'm going to keep figuring it out throughout my life. But my definition of success in like high level is having a job that I'm passionate, that I love doing. Like, this is something that I've like there's two types of way of looking at your job. One of them is like, my job gives me income, and then I do what I love outside from work. Or in my case is like, I want to do something that I love at work, because I'm spending 8, 10, 12 hours of my day just thinking about this. So for me, it's like having a job that I find meaningful, and that I'm working with people that I admire and that I'm learning from, and that I can have some sort of impact. But then another success portion is being able to share moments with my friends and my family. And that's something that I definitely don't want to give up, for anything, right? So success for me, a big portion is just not like making a lot of money, or it's just have like spending the time how you want to spend it.
Wonderful. To our audience, we have been with Arela Solis, a recent graduate of Harvard Business School. Arela, may I tell you that you have been a fountain of knowledge of sharing your experiences. I want to thank you so very much. I'm sure you've helped a tremendous number of our listeners in their own educational journeys. Thank you for sharing so much time with us.
Thank you, Michael. I had a lot of fun, and happy to hopefully be helpful in any way to people that are applying or thinking about applying.
I'm sure you will be. We wish you the very, very best in your future goals.